These questions are asking us to figure out what the end behavior of each function is. So to do this, I'm going to use my Nspire calculator, and I need to add in a graph. So I go to New Document, and I'm going to add in a graph. And I'll start by entering in my first equation here, and hit enter. So here we go. There's our equation. Now there's two things that we have to do. We have to figure out what our y values are approaching as our x values go towards negative infinity, and the same thing as our x values go to positive infinity. So let's start off by going to our left, which means as my x values decrease as we go towards negative infinity, what is my y values doing? Well, as we move to the right, you can see it's kind of like narrowing off, right? Or leveling off, and we have to figure out, well, what's this y value? And the y value is pretty much right on the x-axis, right? So the y value is going to be 0. So as x values decrease and they approach negative infinity, our y values are approaching 0. And do they ever get there? Well, let's check out the table real quick. I'm going to hit Menu, and then View, and then Show Table. And you could see as I'm going to make our x values go lower and lower and lower to positive, or I'm sorry, lower and lower and lower to negative infinity, all my y values right here are getting closer and closer to 0. Closer and closer and closer. It keeps going, 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 and it'll continue to get closer. Eventually you'll see a bunch of, well, there we go. It's getting pretty darn close to 0. So, you know, that's just some more proof. I'm going to hit Control T now to get rid of my table. So that's going to be for the left side. Now, what's happening as my x values approach positive infinity? In other words, what's happening to my y values as we move to the right? So as we go to the right, my y values are going up and up and up and up and up. Farther up, it goes towards positive infinity. So you can check this again in a table. And a shortcut to this is just hitting Control and then T. I highlight my x values, and I'm going to show you as we increase, as we move lower and lower and lower, my x values are getting higher. My y values are getting really large. Right here is 131,000 roughly. Here is 262,000, over 500,000, and then so on. So it's going to go towards positive infinity. And I click this area in my graph, and then Control T to get rid of that table. So there's my end behavior for my first equation. I'm going to hit delete 3 times to get rid of that equation. I'm going to graph my next one. Hit tab. Okay, and there's my next equation. And again, we want to figure out what's happening as x approaches negative infinity. So as we move to our left, what's our y doing? Well, it's going higher and higher and higher towards positive infinity. So that's going to be my end behavior as the x's go towards negative infinity. As we move to the right, as x approaches positive infinity, you can see that the y values are leveling off again, right? So we have to figure out, well, what y value is it leveling off at? And as we move to our left here, it looks like it's going to be about 1, but you could always confirm that on the table. So let's hit Control T to bring up my table. And I'm going to highlight my x values, and I'm going to make those larger. I'm going to scroll down to x equals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. And let's look at the y values. Which y value are we approaching? And as you can see, it's just getting closer and closer to 1. It never touches it, but it'll get closer and closer to it. So I'm going to hit this part of my graph, and then Control T to get rid of my table. To review again, as we go to our left, so as x approaches negative infinity, our y values are approaching positive infinity, and then as x moves to our right, as they get bigger, as it approaches positive infinity, our y values are approaching positive 1. So that's that. Let's move on to the third equation. I hit delete 3 times to get rid of this, and tab 1 more time to plot my last function. Hit hit enter. So there's my last function. This one's going to be a quadratic. It's an upside down parabola. It's opening downwards. But we're going to ask ourselves the same questions. As x approaches negative infinity, so as we move to our left, what's the y values approaching? And as we go farther to the left, my y values are decreasing, so they're going towards negative infinity. As we move to our right, so from here to the right, as x values approach positive infinity, as we get bigger, all the y values are going down again towards negative infinity. And that's going to be negative infinity as well. So that would be the end behavior for a parabola. And just to give you a heads up, for parabolas that open up downwards and parabolas that open up upwards, like a U, they always have the same end behavior. And yeah, that's about that.